another episode of the C-Suite podcast. I've got with me today Andy Ellis. Andy is, you know what? I didn't even ask what your title was at YL.
I'm a partner at YL Ventures.
Andy's a partner at YL Ventures, and that tells me I need to make sure I do all my homework when I'm taking my notes before we start the podcast. But Andy, thanks so much for joining me today. I got to say, the two things that excite me the most about having you on is, number one, I know you can talk leadership.
Yep.
And I know you can talk cybersecurity, and being in the VC space, you probably see more things that are innovative in the future than almost anyone else does in that space. So I'm hoping as we get started that maybe you could share a minute or two of a rundown in those areas, what brought you to where you are today, and what's exciting you looking forward.
Yeah. So I used to be the chief security officer at a little company many people have never heard of called Akamai, which makes the internet work. If you interact with the web, you're using Akamai almost every single day. So I was there for 20 years after I got out of the Air Force, where I did what we called information warfare back then. Now it's cybersecurity, and I moved into the venture capital world. So I'm having a blast. I interact with, a lot of innovators and founders. We have about 14 companies in our portfolio that we invest very early seed stage. So a big piece of that is, I spend, probably, maybe 4 to 5 hours a week just meeting with a founder for the first time, where we're trying to decide if, is their idea the right idea? Is it going to hit at the right time? Are they the right people to execute on the idea? Are we the right partner for them? Sometimes I've had people where I'm like, this is a great idea, but you're not going to get the right value partnering with us. It's very, very rare. Usually if I think they've got an amazing idea, I will figure out how to provide value because I want to be part of that.
Well, part of my underpinning philosophy for everything I do and how I interact with my clients is that I have this idea in my head that you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have the right talent to execute it, you're sunk. That strategy is not going to work.
Yep.
And the challenge with that I've found, and it's kind of, you find this all over the internet. People say, well, people don't leave companies, they leave managers. I'd go a step further and focus less on management and focus more on leadership, because I think those are two related but different things.
Very different.
And I'm curious, maybe you could chat a little bit, especially in your context around venture capital, cybersecurity. How critical is it? How critical is leadership in that context?
So leadership is huge. And I have a definition I use for leadership. So I always like to start with this one, which is leadership is how you affect people who do work. And work is just convert energy into value. And so that could be in your business. It can also be in your personal life, in your social life. We'll ignore those for the moment. So everybody who's interacting with that, energy to value transaction is doing leadership. So it's not about authority, which is what most people think about. It's like, oh, the CEO is the leader. No, the CEO is the authority. Every one of your employees is a leader because they're affecting the employee next to them. They're affecting themselves. And the leadership culture that you have is what people leave. And there's an essay I read a long time ago. I forget who wrote it. It's about the concept of shields down. And here's the reality, which is every one of your employees could go make more money and get more done at a different company. You just need to accept that there is almost nobody who is optimally paid for optimal work where they are today. If they want to leave, it's the right choice for them. And it always will be. Now, most of the time they have their shields up. They're not paying attention to what's going on the outside. They like where they are. The inertia cost of moving is really high. There's a lot of reasons that people don't leave. But at the end of the day, the real reason they don't leave is they're not looking. And bad leadership brings that shield down. So the moment that they get pissed off because of something in the environment, which might be a colleague complaining or throwing their work under the bus, like they came up with this great idea, they brought it over to their neighbor, and their neighbor's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, go away, stop distracting me. And that night a friend says, hey, by the way, I've got a hot startup in this space, would you like to just come in and interview? Like, no pressure. And the day before the person would have said no, and now they say yes, and now they're going to see somebody who's going to say, oh, I'll pay you a little bit more, I'll give you better equity, and I'll do more fulfilling work for you, and we will listen to your ideas. And that's how you lose people.
Yeah. And timing is everything. When we, I have these conversations on a regular basis with clients when, okay, you look at the candidate market, the talent pool that's out there. We don't think about it in 4D. We don't
Right.
think about it that there are certain segments of the talent pool that are only going to be available at certain pivotal times in their life. And those pivotal times might be, to your point, they've got a colleague, man, all this person does is complain. I need to get out of here. It's such a negative, toxic environment. And if it were 6 weeks later, that person may have gone and, oh, it's refreshing and I have no interest looking anywhere. So it's
Right.
when they hear that message and resonates.
Right.
So
And did you happen to reach out to them on that day?
Yes.
And any other day, they're going to ignore your message on that day. They're like, oh, sure, I'll take a 15-minute call.
Well, here's a little dirty secret that came out a number of years ago. There's a study, so you put your money on those as you will.
Yep.
Where the number of people who actually apply to jobs is very limited. There's a group that applies a lot because they have to. There's a group that applies because they're agitated, and it's intermittent, it's idiosyncratic at best. But by and large, most people, mid-level white-collar professionals, upper-level white-collar professionals, will take a phone call from a recruiter or a recruiting person. It could be a CEO. It doesn't necessarily have to be a recruiter, who want to talk to them about a role that is aligned with where they want to go in their career, with their background and where they think they're going to afford. 87% of people will take that call.
Yep.
87%. A scary thing, but the timing still matters. So great, you can have these conversations, but if the timing isn't there, that's about as far as it'll go.
Yep.
So how does timing in this context then impact a leader who's trying to grow, innovate, grow, scale an endeavor? And the reason I say that is when you are leading an enterprise, like any business that you would fund or get involved in, the demands on the leader or leadership structure are manifold.
Yes.
So
and they
what do you
change. And this is actually, I think, the most important thing, especially in the startup world. The change that happens in enterprises, I've been there, there's a lot of change, but it is nothing compared to what goes on in a startup. A startup reinvents itself about every 18 months. It's a completely different company, often with the same executives at the top of it. And if they're still trying to run it like it's that old company, like that's where they have a problem, where they're creating timing within their employee base. And I like to look at it as like the prank culture. Everybody's familiar with like pranking culture in a like a tight-knit environment. Like when I was first at Akamai, I don't even want to say what year that was. It was at least in this millennium, but just barely. And we would do these things to our colleagues. Like if somebody walked away and left their computer unscreen saved, you'd like walk over and you'd send email out to somebody as them. And you're like, you make some joke, and then the other person knew what it was, and they'd reply back. And it's this thing that you do. It's like the wall of shame, or you send out to the whole team, "Hey, I'm buying coffee," and everybody knows what's going on. And you're playing this prank among a group of friends, even though you're work colleagues. At this point, you're tight knit, you're bonded.
Right.
You start to grow, and somebody new walks into the team, and everybody else is like instantly, it's like, "Oh yeah, you're part of the team. This is cool." That person is terrified. They're not part of the team. They showed up. They don't know any of who you are. They don't know anything. They walk away on their third day from their computer, and somebody sends email as them and shames them in front of the whole environment.
Yeah.
Right. And the other people are like, why are you making a big deal out of it? And this person's like, why would I not make a big deal out of it? It's like, you violated my privacy. You're on my machine. You're claiming to send stuff. Like it now gets blown out of proportion. If you're one of the old hands, to the new person, you're like, this cannot be blown out of proportion. What you did was unconscionable. And this disconnect in culture is massive. And this now starts to create timing issues. Like the new person wants to change the old culture. Rightfully, it needs to change. But the old folks do not want to change the culture that much. Rightfully, like this is part of who you are. Right. And how you navigate that balance is a huge leadership challenge.
Massive, massive. So do you see that as probably the biggest problem in your area?
I mean, obviously making money is always going to be the biggest problem. Let's be very honest. From a leadership perspective, we talk about different things, but the biggest problem is always, can you make money? Can you get to profitability? Like keep your eye on that ball. Yeah. But how do you connect that to you're an organization whose job is to go make money? Sometimes this means you have to make hard choices early. I know a lot of companies that overinvest and they hire a bunch of people, and then they're optimistic, they're not making their number. Now they have to let go a bunch of folks. And one of the hardest decisions you have to make as a leader is, do you rip off that Band-Aid early, or do you let it wait a little while? Because maybe things will get better. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in leadership is, that people want to listen to their angel instead of their devil. I have a friend who uses this analogy. You have an angel manager on one shoulder and a devil manager on the other shoulder. And the devil says, like, screw over your employees. They don't matter. Do what's right for the bottom line of the business. And the angel says, screw over the business. The bottom line doesn't matter. Do what's right for the humans. And if you only listen to one of those, you're a bad leader. The trick is to find the places where they agree, where they say, oh, this is the right thing for the bottom line, and this is the right thing for the employees. Pre-COVID, now everybody's really hypersensitive about illness, which I love. But pre-COVID, we had a policy in my team that anybody could send anyone home. Like, you could just look at someone and say, you have symptoms, get out of the building, go home. Or even like, you're not functional because you just had a bad breakup, your wife gave you divorce papers, like whatever it is, go home and deal with that. But stop dealing with it in the building, because it's not good for the bottom line of the company, because you're not being productive and you are putting everybody else at physical or emotional risk. And it's not good for you to be sitting here when you should be doing something else.
Yeah, you're not going to be as effective. I always had the philosophy, learn the hard way, obviously. If you're sick, please be selfish, keep it to yourself, stay home.
Right, stay home. And in fact, and I don't even want you,
it's okay.
And if you're going to stay home because you have symptoms, I don't want you to struggle to work. Like, if you can give me like a 1 hour quick, like, here's all the important tasks that need to be done that I'm not going to do today, and then go take care of yourself so that you're better tomorrow. But if you work your 6 hours at home and then tomorrow you're more sick because you didn't get any rest time, like, this is not good for anybody.
Yeah, it's snowballs.
That's like the real key. When you can really hit that and say, what is best for the business is best for the employee, you win.
Yeah, awesome. So I would say, could we go so far as to say that you're something of a bona fide expert in the area of leadership, with some proof positive that we're looking at over your shoulder here in the video?
I like to think so, yeah. So right here, 1% Leadership, which is the book I wrote on leadership. And look, and I'm going to say this very shamelessly, I think this is the best book on leadership anybody will ever read. But I also say that's a really low bar. Like, most books on leadership are awful. They might be entertainingly awful. But at the end of the day, most approaches to leadership are like, here is this person, and we're going to write a hagiography. Like, this person is Saint Jack Welch of GE. And if you're like Jack Welch, you'll be an amazing leader. And all you have to do is, rack and stack your employees and fire the bottom 10% every year. Like, that worked for Jack Welch at a specific time and place for very specific reasons. It's an awful strategy. But if you read his biography, that's basically what it distills down to. That's his leadership philosophy. That's like a cult. Like, first of all, nobody would buy his book if it just said rack and stack and fire 10%. You'd be like, oh, okay, I've read your book. Like, the Cliff Notes is great.
Right.
Sorry for anybody who wanted to go buy and read his book. I think that leadership is about a set of skills. And we each bring those to the table in a different way, in the same way that in the NFL, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes don't look alike, but wow, do they have a lot of skills in common. The important part of leadership is developing the skills and then putting your own brand on top of that. Like, who are you as a leader? Well, you're somebody who is skilled first and has a personality second. If you put your personality first and not your skills, you're going to be ineffective as a leader. People might love you, but you're not going to be
the wrong
effective.
thing. You're leading with something that can change, and your principles and the skills in there shouldn't.
Yeah, and so I wrote this book basically as a set of essays where every chapter is one leadership skill. The title of the chapter is the summary of the skill as one sentence, almost as if it were a tweet or whatever we're supposed to call those on X these days. And then on average, 762 words to explain the lesson. I believe in writing short because I had the time while writing it. And so it's better for me to take the time to write short, concise messages so that people don't have to spend the time trying to figure out what I'm trying to tell you.
Right. I think it's smart, and it's pithy, and it's absorbable, which is a huge deal. Let me ask you this, Andy, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, connect, collaborate, however it might be, what's the best way for them to find you?
So easiest way is going to be on X or Twitter, where I'm
Hmm.
CSO Andy. That's for Chief Security Officer Andy. You can also find me on LinkedIn, also CSO Andy, or just look for Andy Ellis. Occasionally, you'll find me at other places. I have a newsletter that goes out usually once a week, but not always. If I don't have anything pithy to say, I just don't send the newsletter. I wait until I have
Yeah.
something pithy to say. And that's duhaone, duhaone.substack.com.
Well, Andy, Ellis, thanks so much for joining us on the
Thanks for
C-Suite
having
Edge
me.
podcast. Man, I appreciate it. I think we could, you and I might have to talk about the long form podcast I do too, because I think we could really go down some rabbit holes. But I really
Oh,
appreciate what you
especially
shared today.
talking about the talent pool in there. I have some hot takes to go there.
Well, maybe we need to do that. Andy,
Yeah.
thanks so much again.
Thanks, John.